I'm Lance Lysowski, the Sabres beat writer for the Buffalo News, coming to you with something new. We're going to try something different here. Rather than me just talking about a specific subject, I'm not anybody who's listening, watching, however you're consuming this. I'm sure you've read our mailbags in the Buffalo News. Jay Skursky does an excellent one on the Bills. I put together a Sabres one, not as often as Jay does, but collect questions from readers through Twitter, also known as X these days, or email. I collect those, I answer them. You can view the story in print and online, and I just collected quite a few this week, actually, from readers, folks on social media, Sabres fans. So thank you to everyone who submitted. And for now on, each time I write a mailbag, I'm also going to do a little video with one, right? Hey, take one of the questions, I'll answer it on here. A different way to just give people a different option on how they want to consume their Sabres content, give them, and it gives me more of an opportunity to expand on a topic. And for this particular question, rather than going too long on answering it for this particular reader, I thought this is a great opportunity to speak about maybe a topic that is not going to be spoken about as much, just given the way the Sabres season has gone on. So let's get into it. Gotta have a Java. That is the reader's Twitter handle. Thank you again for submitting. The question is, what prospects do you sense have generated the most buzz among the Sabres staff? I'm going to completely ignore all the prospects in Rochester for this one. That would be too easy. We all know Isak Roseyan, Nikita Novikov, of course, Yuri Kulik. Those are the guys that management and everybody in Rochester, development staff, they're thrilled about the progress those guys have made, both in Rochester at international tournaments, in Novikov's case, over at the KHL before he came to Rochester this season. Matt Savoy, we all know he's in Moose Jaw, having another great year. He's missed the last couple of games. I'm not exactly sure why. Something to keep an eye on. Looks like he may be dealing with an injury. I'm going to go overseas for my answer, Europe specifically, and there are three prospects that I hear about more than anyone else in the pipeline when it comes to the guys that, you don't think about every day or you don't hear about as often because they're not playing in the NCAA, they're not in Rochester, they're not in Canadian juniors, and, of course, they're not on the Sabres roster since the Sabres have a few of those on their team this year as well. So, three players, two of whom are in Sweden this season, Noah-Ostlund and Anton-Wahlberg. I'm sure those don't surprise my listeners, viewers, readers who really follow Sabres prospects, especially at this point in the season. Ostlund and Wahlberg have played prominent roles over in the Swedish Hockey League this season. Wahlberg both played at the IIHF World Junior Championships, standouts. Ostlund is a true center and a really good one, an exciting young player, a first-round pick only a couple of years ago. Hasn't been over to Rochester yet. We know that he spent a few weeks with the Amerks during their playoff run, had an injury, so he couldn't get in the lineup, couldn't practice with the team, but he's really a dynamic two-way player. If you see the Sabres decide to move Casey Mittelstadt at some point, it's with Noah-Ostlund in mind. He's somebody that, once he does come over, I always recommend having a player spend time in Rochester. I think especially where the Sabres are at and they're playing to win, use Rochester as your development tool. Don't use Buffalo as that. I think Ostlund's going to need time in Rochester. He should receive a good chunk of time, play a prominent role. But he's got a lot of potential. He's somebody that I'm sure other teams are going to be asking about when Kevin Adams is having trade talks leading up to the March 8th deadline. Noah-Ostlund, he's somebody that you could see playing in a middle six role once he does break into the NHL. He's a great playmaker, superb vision, and really starting to add a scoring touch. There's always, the questions about production in the SHL. How's that going to translate to North America? But very good player, continues to take steps in the right direction, and one guy to keep an eye on, especially as we get closer to, the spring season here, because Ostlund's somebody, as is Wahlberg, who can come over and join the Amerks, and possibly, help that group once they reach the playoffs or even beforehand. And Wahlberg, second-round pick in this past draft, if you didn't follow that, that time period, somebody the Sabres loved. They tried to trade back into the first round to get him late, couldn't pull it off, and they were lucky that he fell to them. A big, strong power forward with skill. He's already playing a really big role for Malmo in the SHL. Somebody that he's not built like, a lot of people focus on the more slight forward prospects in this group, at least slight at their age. Zach Benson, for example, I think is going to be built like Jeff Skinner once physical maturity takes time. You can't rush that point. But Wahlberg's a bigger guy. He's a power forward with skill and somebody that has a mature game to the point where he can be in Rochester next season. He's a late bloomer, which is really surprising. I mean, this is a guy who, and I sound like Chris Collins with that, so I should apologize, but no, Anton-Wahlberg is somebody who was really ignored by the Swedish Hockey Federation when it came to them picking their national teams throughout his teenage years. It wasn't until about a year and a half ago where he really started to earn the attention that he was deserving. He hit a growth spurt, started to become the player that we're seeing now with a great skating stride, mature game, and his team last year was fighting off relegation and trying to stay in the SHL for another season. He was on the ice late in the game to try to preserve a lead. He used somebody that the coach turned to play in those big situations. Now, he's been able to play center at times. It's a position they've used him in, but more likely to be a winger at the next level, and that's fine with where this organization is at. If they move Ostlund, that's going to read to me that they're going to sign Middlestad. So then you're looking at Thompson, Cousins, Middlestad as your top three. Peyton Krebs is somebody that, again, like Ostlund, teams are going to be asking about Krebs. So how is Kevin Adams going to handle his center depth? And Ostlund is somebody to keep an eye on when it comes to that storyline. But Wahlberg, big forward, and somebody that I'm really interested to see how he takes the next step in his game. I know the Sabres staff really excited about everything they've seen. Those two guys have really popped again this season, which, hey, development isn't linear. You're going to have guys who hit rough patches, and some of those are longer than others, but it's all about how players work through that process, and these guys so far have avoided that. Some injuries, of course. Ostlund was dealing with a concussion situation you really can't avoid before World Juniors, but he's come back healthy, playing well. And the last of the three that I'm going to mention here is Prokhor-Poltapov, Russian winger, big, strong, physical guy with a scoring touch. Has not been able to have that consistent role in the Continental Hockey League in Russia this season, but he's made an impact when he's been up there. When he's dropped down to that second-tier league, the VHL, really, really good player. Now, the Sabres have time on their side with Poltapov. He's under contract in Russia for another season, so they can't even sign him until the summer of 2025. But he is somebody, if he continues this trek and if he ends up in a bigger role in the KHL next year and gets that 18 to 20 minutes a game, he's somebody, it's reasonable to believe that if the Sabres are able to sign him, he's somebody who might actually be ready at that point to step in the NHL. He'll have been, at 2025, he'll be almost 5 years, 23, 24 years old. Of course, as I've said, Rochester is such an invaluable development tool. It's really become that since Seth Appert was hired, since the Sabres have really refocused and reshaped their development plan. But it's somebody to keep an eye on. He might be at the point where he's not only physically mature enough to be in the National Hockey League in 2025, but he might have the skill and all of the other intangibles, on ice, attributes you're looking for somebody who's able to step in at such a young age. So to summarize for you guys, Noah-Ostlund, Anton-Wahlberg, and Prokhor-Poltapov. Poltapov, I don't like making comparisons, but you just think around the league of those big power forwards who have skill, who can really disrupt the front of the net, the type of gritty, competitive players that you really want to surround your core with. You think about Zach Benson, and then you think about guys like Matt Savoy or Jack Quinn, JJ Peterka. Imagine adding two other power forwards to that mix. And then you got Noah-Ostlund, who's a really promising young center that gives Kevin Adams as a general manager more flexibility when it comes to shaping this roster long term. Well, would you feel comfortable moving one of the centers on your NHL roster knowing full well that Noah-Ostlund is somebody you really believe in, a young center who's not that far, not far removed from, possibly being able to help you in the NHL. So those are my three. I'm Lance Lysowski from the Buffalo News. We're going to continue this exercise, this little experiment to pull out a mailbag question and really take more time in putting it together. Gives me more time to answer the question, give a more thorough explanation. I thought this was a good opportunity, a good question to pick. If you ever have any for a written mailbag, I might end up picking it for a video. We'll see how it goes, but you could submit your question to me via email, LLYSOWSKI@buffnews.com, or on X, formerly known as Twitter. My handle there is LLYSOWSKI. If I didn't get to your question this time, I'm sorry. I ran out of room or there was some overlap. I do try to keep a file for next time. Some of those end up getting outdated, I understand. And it's tough to always find room to be able to write a mailbag, just given the NHL schedule. So we're going to try to see how we can make this work moving forward. Try to give you all Sabres content in different ways and just to meet your needs. I know podcasts are such an easy way for people to absorb information. And although don't deliver that through the Buffalo News, I think that, hey, 12-minute video on a really specific topic that is relevant not only to the current conversation, but those that we're going to be having in the months and years moving forward. So thank you again. I'm Lance Lysowski. Until next time, see you soon.